evening. Thank you for coming. Tonight, we're going to have a little bit of a different style of presentation in that there's two of us. We've got 4 different sections to go through tonight. I'm going to start off with describing remote cameras and how wildlife professionals and the public use these type of cameras. And then Sandra's going to talk to us more about the history of the HBE nest site and recap of the last nesting season. And then I'm going to move into the new equipment we have for this season, the installation of that equipment, and then we'll wrap up with talking about future and outreach education and citizen science that we plan to do. Now, remote cameras, it's interesting that the best definition of remote camera is the one I found in Wikipedia, and it's basically a camera placed by a photographer in an area where a photographer generally cannot be. And there's a lot of examples of these type of cameras that you see around. And it's football season, so many of you might be familiar with this one up in the left-hand corner up here. This is a stadium camera, and these are a newer invention. They've been around over a decade now. But this is a camera that is flown around the stadium. And if you watch football, you'll see these cameras zipping around. They can get some amazing shots. And also, if you've been down over the Golden Gate Bridge, you might have witnessed a recent change. There's no more tolling. Actually, what happens now is you have these remote cameras. They take pictures of your license plate and a picture of you, and you get a bill in the mail. So things are really changing. These cameras are really starting to take off. And there's a great example of one of the most remote cameras that humans have made. This is the Curiosity rover. This one's sitting on Mars. It's beaming back image, and it's on average 200 million miles away. 6 minutes it takes, on average, it takes 6 minutes to get imagery back from these devices. They're pretty incredible. And another one you may be familiar with is standard surveillance cameras. Now this is a surveillance camera that's on a business. I believe this is in Colorado somewhere. It's check this out. Yeah, what a great surprise. Okay, this business owner comes back, and he's like, who's vandalizing my trash cans? Who's stealing my giant dumpsters? And to his surprise, you've got this 500-plus pound. That's a bear. It's a black bear. So you can see where, okay, people use this. This is obviously maybe an area with high crime. They've got bars on the window. And this is just a security camera. You catch an interesting thing like this. So, and also, what wildlife biologists use these style of cameras too. And there's one camera I want to talk about specifically. And this is a camera that any of us can own. They're pretty inexpensive, and wildlife enthusiasts and professionals use them as a trail camera. And if you're a sportsman, if you like to hunt, you might be familiar with these. They're a little box. And you put them out, and they can take some incredible pictures. And they're really simple. And sometimes, here's an example. This is a North American otter, and this was put on a trail coming out of a pond. And these scientists were able to see these animals moving across here. And check out this fish. This thing's scary. This is big. Yeah. And then this picture up here is of a juvenile bald eagle. It's probably a 2-3-year-old bird, and it's on a carcass. This is a photo from the Institute for Wildlife Studies. This is one of their projects, and they were monitoring these young birds that were coming in. This was a supplemental feeding effort to support these birds during the reintroduction program down there. And they use these small types of cameras to do this, and they're very small. They're easy to install. You can go and you can put a strap on a tree. You can even screw them into a tree. Pretty reliable. Waterproof units. Motion activation, so you set it there, and as an animal walks by, it triggers it. And you can set them to collect pictures, still photos, or video. Most of them nowadays have infrared lighting, and that's just a type of lighting that our eyes can't pick up, but the camera sensor can. So you can get some really interesting shots. And some of them also have a flash, and that's good for still photography, but not so much for the video. And the photo quality, it's decent. Some of it is getting better. As time goes by, these units are becoming more and more advanced, and they're coming down in price. Now, there's a couple disadvantages to these systems. they eat batteries, especially if you're in an area where there's high traffic. And sometimes they like to trigger when a leaf blows by. And if you're in a windy area with a lot of stuff moving, you might get a lot of false triggers. But they also require that you change memory cards. These are small units, they don't have a lot of capacity. So this type of unit requires maintenance. Here's a couple examples. I have a friend, his name's Mark Bailey, and he shared with me some images. Now, he's not a hunter, but he has great fun setting these cameras up around his yard, and he's made friends with all his wildlife. Now, he doesn't hunt them, he just likes to take pictures. There you go. Bears love to eat these cameras. I don't know. Here you go. This is a coyote and a bobcat hunched over a carcass of a small deer that one of them had taken. And yeah, you get some great stuff. And here is the same bobcat walking away down the drive.
Where is this?
This is up in Eureka. Yeah. So if you're having problems with the raccoons knocking over your trash, or if the rats are getting in your chicken coop, and you're just curious about that sort of monitoring, you want to see what's going on and see pictures of your wildlife, these types of cameras are very accessible. They're super easy to use. And there's a couple problems. I already mentioned a few, but they have limitations for wildlife professionals. And sometimes there's some clowns in the woods too. And if you have friends that think they're funny, you might end up with a photo like this. They can get ripped off pretty easy. People like to take them, so you need to camouflage them well. But for long-term research, or for monitoring, let's say, a bald eagle nest like this one shown here, you can't get up to that nest once the birds have started nesting. You can't get up to the equipment. So you need to go about your monitoring in a different fashion. And you really need to go more towards the surveillance style cameras. And they're better suited for this long-term monitoring. And this is an example of a pan-tilt zoom unit, much bigger. It requires some serious installation. Here's a picture of an osprey nest that has a camera on it. And that thing is big and ugly. And you might be worried that the birds wouldn't like it, but the thing about many of these nesting birds is as long as you have this equipment installed prior to them coming in and initiating nesting, they get used to it. They accept it, and they deal with it. These units are a bit more expensive, and they are reliable, but they do take some know-how to operate. And one of the great advantages of them is you have programmable operation. So you can set them to record at certain times of the day or under certain conditions, and they shoot a lot better video, and they can take really nice photos. The storage options are also a lot better. You can have them record directly to a computer hard drive, which is much larger than, say, a little disk that you might put in, like a memory disk. So you can also make them stream live imagery to the internet. Another great thing about this style camera is you can network them. And what that means is that you can have multiple cameras, not just one, but you can have 2 more cameras all on one system, capturing imagery at the same time. And they're very customizable. You can put infrared lighting on them, you can put glare shields, just a bunch of neat options. So, at the end of 2012, we had an opportunity to put a camera on a bald eagle nest that was near the Humboldt Bay. There was private landowners that had been watching this nest since 2005. And Sandra's going to go into a bit more detail about this and how this effort all started. But we had this opportunity to do this. And the Humboldt Wildlife Care Center received a grant from the Sequoia Park Zoo. And with that, we were able to help us buy the long network cable that was required to get this camera image down to the ground, and also a video encoder. So we worked with IWS specifically Dr. Sharp, and used Institute for Wildlife Studies expertise to install this camera. And they donated the little camera here. And this camera that I'm showing you is one of the smallest of the surveillance-style cameras. It's about the size of your thumb. And we decided to put this camera up, this small camera up, for a couple reasons. One, we didn't have a lot of time. The end of December when this was installed, we were worried about the adult eagles coming in to start nesting, so we had to do this quickly. Another thing is we didn't know the habits of the adult eagles. We didn't know which way they came into the nest. We didn't know a number of different things, which branches they liked to perch on. So we needed to just really make whatever we did there minimal. And again, this is the most basic style camera, but I'm going to pull out and show you the top of the tree. And note that this tree top is dead. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But this is a good time to introduce two of the stars of this nest. That's Kyle and Swarm, and Sandra's going to talk more about it.
So, the beginning. It all started for me with a phone call about a person saying, hey, I've got an eagle in my backyard. I'm just not quite sure what that means for me. I'm like, eagle in my backyard. So, they told me the nest just appeared over the holidays when they were away, and they came back, and the nest was there, and eagles were coming and bringing sticks in, and I'm like, what? So I went in there and talked to them about what that meant for them as far as what they could and couldn't do on their property and how it might affect them. And of course they had privacy concerns. All the birders were seeing eagles flying back and forth to the bay, and they were putting it on their bird box and trying to figure out where this nest was. And so I quickly called them and said, hey, I know where the nest is, it's safe, I'm monitoring, stop looking for the nest. And that worked out really well, so that was good. The landowners put their own self-restrictions. They no longer allowed the kids to ride the quad anywhere near the nest, and they were quiet about coming up the driveway, only to find out that eagles didn't really care once they knew their vehicles. I notified the local timber company. They did helicopter surveys in the area for ospreys, so I let them know the eagle nest was there so they could modify their flight path, which they did. And then there's also a need to notify the neighbor. There was a neighbor that had an active plan, and so we had to let them know that they weren't going to be able to operate during the nesting season. And then that brought in the California Department of Forestry, Fish and Game, and the Fish and Wildlife Service. So foresters, biologists, and wardens. And as the process went forward, the really neat thing is that many of the neighbors became the eagle allies, and they were constantly watching to make sure that nobody was coming up to the area and disturbing the eagles, which is really great. So the eagles are actually highly protected, both at the state and the federal level. And while we constantly hear that it has been taken off the endangered species list, that's true at the federal level. But at the California level, they also have their own Endangered Species Act, and they are still listed as threatened and has been, or endangered, and have been since 1971. They're also on the California Fully Protected list, and at the federal level, they are still protected under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act and the Bald and Gold Eagle Protection Act. So there's a lot of agencies and a lot of different levels of protection that can come for these eagles. And then in this area of concern is also the forest practice rules, and there's a special section on bald eagles within the forest practice rules that talks about what you're allowed to do, protections within a ½ mile of any nest, and there's habitat retention that is required. So why a camp? So this is the first bald eagle nest in over 40 years on Humboldt Bay, and that in itself is exciting. But when you're concerned about privacy, you don't want to just blurt out you have a nest in your backyard, because otherwise people are all going to be coming and driving up your driveway. So we also found that this pair was very special, and part of that is because when you have a close-up view, which this landowner had this nest within 75 feet of their home, and as you drive up their driveway, you can see the nest. And as you park, you're standing practically below the old nest. The new nest is a little further now, but and so they got to know the personalities of these eagles, and they wanted to share it with people, but then not also be inundated. So a cam was a great way to be able to share these wonderful eagles and that experience with the community while maintaining some level of privacy. And then in 2009, for unknown reasons, the nest that they started failed. They had definitely gone into the incubation phase based on behavior, but as far as we could tell, the eggs never hatched. And then all of a sudden they picked up and started a new nest, and it was a little further away, and it had some screen trees between the house and the nest. And so not only was it higher up so you couldn't see into the nest, but it was also not as visible just from standing in the driveway. So, and that led to making monitoring a lot harder. We used to be able to see the eaglets' heads pop up so we could verify that there was 2 eaglets and things like that. And in the new nest, you don't see that until they start branching. So we monitored this nest every year. So they came in at the end of 2005 and started to build their nest, and the first actual nesting season was in 2006. They produced 2 eaglets for the very first year right away, and did so. And here in 2009, you can see they moved from a redwood tree to a Douglas fir tree. And at that point, you see the numbers go from being a number to a 1+. And that's because we could never verify that there was actually 2 or 1 individuals. And so we know there was at least 1 eaglet, but we don't know if there's possibly 2 or 3. So as far as we can tell, up until this last season, the minimum number of eaglets that have fledged from this tree is 13. And isn't that amazing? And also, the eaglets, when they leave, they come back to nest in about 5 years' time. And so you can see that the first few eaglets might be back here, nesting in areas around here. So that's exciting as well. So to get the cam up took years of effort. Finding the right people with the right know-how, trying to explain to the people that knew about cams that really it's in the backyard, we have electricity. We don't have all the remote issues that a lot of the cams that they were using had to have, so we didn't have to have photovoltaic cells, we didn't have to have batteries, we had direct connection to the internet, and it was hard for them to think about the fact that it would be that close to someone's house. In 2009, Jim came onto the project and was climbing the tree to get some additional information about it, and he brought in the thought of asking IWS, the Institute of Wildlife Studies, to help us because they had years of expertise with remote cameras on the Channel Islands as part of their reintroduction program. And in 2011, the landowner approached Linda Parkinson, and we had a meeting with the Wildlife Care Center board and talked about trying to figure out a way to help us get that done with education as the primary goal. And so in 2012, the Wildlife Care Center got that grant from the zoo that Jim already talked about or mentioned. And IWS was also brought in to have the expertise. So as the pieces of the puzzle started coming together, we got to purchase the network cables, we got the cam, the expertise, we got Jim to climb the tree and put it up. The landowner donated one of their computers and really allowed us to inundate their home to set all of this up. And so we're like, phew, well, it wasn't as easy as we thought it was going to be. So we had timing, weather. Jim went up at the very last time he could, and it was windy and probably shouldn't have been up in the nest, but he did it anyway for the cause. The camera position was a challenge, partly because the top of the tree was dead, but also trying to figure out which way the eagles were going to come in and how that would relate to where the cam should be. We couldn't put the camera as high as we wanted, so we had concerns about whitewash, the spray going onto the camera, which did happen during the season. But also, as it turns out, they kept building the sticks up, because every year they add more sticks. The camera actually, in a sense, got closer and closer to the nest as the nest got built up. And it became close enough that the eagles could actually go up there and go, hey, what is that? And so we were quite scared they were going to bite the cam off, but he didn't, so that was good. And then very early on, we also had a storm, which caused failure of the cam. And so we're like, oh, all that work, and now it's not going to work at all. But we decided to turn off the system for a couple of days, see if drying out might just, with electronics, you never know. And sure enough, we were able to let it dry out, and it worked for the remainder of the season. We did have problems with the mic every time it rained. It would start garbling, so we would have to turn off the mic, but we at least had picture the whole time. And we were able to work out most of the bugs prior to egg laying. February 5th, we put the cam up live. That was an exciting day. And they were already starting nestorations at that point. They laid their eggs. We watched that. We watched the eggs hatch. We made it to NBC Nightly News. It was just amazing nationally on the news. We were able to, with the help of Dave Garcelon of the Institute of Wildlife Studies, we were able to get the birds banded. Jim, again, climbed the tree to get the birds. And Dave banded them. And so now we can start actually seeing if those birds return. We can get a band resite. Both eaglets fledged. It's never a guarantee whether they lay the eggs, whether they hatch. If they're gonna make it is never a guarantee, and that's part of these live cameras. We're just watching what happens in the wild, and there's no interference on our part. So we were very happy that both eaglets fledged. We had Scrappy, the visitor, a 2 to 3 year old bald eagle that came back to the nest and decided he wanted to be part of the family for a week or so. And then in August, the eaglets left the area with their parents, as is typical for behavior. So education was our primary goal. And we were very lucky in bringing in the Institute of Wildlife Studies, who already had live cams with chat, already had trained moderators. And a few of those moderators came on to help at the Humboldt Bay Cam and helped train additional moderators. They also started a Facebook group so that we would have a means to give immediate updates and to have discussions that was not live. We had priority resources given to teachers. When teachers identified themselves, we made sure to give them our full attention so that they could relay the information to their students. And we came up with the Name the Chick competition, which required not just to name the chick, but we were very cognizant that the children would have to do something as a group to help the decision. And so we made them write a paragraph as to why they thought the name was appropriate. And I did some internet searching, and as far as I can tell, I know of no other bald eagle chick that has been named by school children. And that really shocks me, because to us it was an obvious decision. So with this, you actually end up building a whole community around this nest. So very important to us was creating a safe place for people to be able to share and learn. There were no stupid questions. The moderators were amazing. They would answer the same question over and over and over again, and every time with a good attitude, because what mattered is that as many people as possible got the information. Everything had to be G-rated, and that was because grandparents were logging on with their grandchildren. School children were logging on from school, and so it was very important that we maintained decorum, that we maintained the education aspect, and that any child of any age could read what was going on and it would be appropriate. We decided early on to have no direct advocacy. Advocacy was not our goal, so we didn't want people to start petitions or things like that. Our goal was education, and through the process of education, people could decide for themselves what to do with that knowledge. We also decided there would be no year-round fundraising. This was not meant to be a cash cow. This was meant to educate, and that we would have fundraisers that would do things like help upgrade the cam, that would help with the education and things like that. All the chat moderators are volunteers. As a matter of fact, everyone as part of this project is volunteer. There's absolutely no paid staff, which makes it just that much more amazing that so many people can come together and bring this forward. So again, Facebook, we get to share pictures, we can share videos, and then this year we added what's called a Zeta board for the people that don't have Facebook. That was a big thing last year. Not everybody has Facebook. And also, it is much better for keeping information for us scientists. Facebook, once you put something up, after a while it gets buried, and trying to find that information again is almost impossible. So we have better archiving possibilities. Volunteers really are the backbone of this community. They give of their time, their knowledge, their enthusiasm, and they really contribute to the community in many ways. Not just photos and videos, but we had the community said, hey, we want to have a party to celebrate the fledging of these eagles. And I'm like, guys, this is like the middle of my field season. I don't have time to, you know, coordinate all that. And like, we'll do it. And I was like, okay. Then they wanted to have T-shirts and cups and mugs and everything. I don't have time to do that. And the community again came up and said, we'll do it. We'll do it. And so IWS was kind enough to lend us their PayPal button so that we could have direct donations towards the camp. And then we started the HBE Cafe press site so that people could buy their T-shirts and things like that. And then this is Debbie. She made this hat to come to the pledge party. It signifies the nest. You have the two eagles, the skunk that we found up on the nest that they made, the feather for the egret. And then after this party, it was so popular, she auctioned it off and gave the money to IWS to further this project. So it's just really amazing. And so with all that fundraising, we got new equipment.
Well, the HBE community very early on made it clear that they wanted a system upgrade. They wanted a better camera. And so with the fundraising, that was our priority. And we brought Peter Sharp up from the Channel Islands where he works as an eagle biologist. And Peter and I were working on another project. It was installing a remote monitoring system for an arboreal salamander that lives in the top of redwoods. So he was here, and we put these two projects together, and we worked on HBE one week and the salamander project the other. But this is just a picture of what it takes to get one of these remote systems up in a tree. Yeah, lots of cable. That's an example of a pan-tilt zoom camera. This guy right here. And this is the picture. This is a picture of our new system. Now, you may remember from one of the previous slides, the top of this tree is dead. So it makes installing equipment up there very difficult. We had to make what's called a false branch to mount all the stuff on. And we were able to put the infrared light, which you can see right here. And this is what we call camera 2. This is a view looking straight down at the nest, and it allows us to get the whole view. We can see whatever's going on. Now this camera right here is our, what we call a PTZ camera. And it allows us to, we can actually, from the ground, move the view around. We can zoom in on things. We can, it's amazing what we can do. It's very high quality imagery that we get out of this system. We also had to upgrade, because these cameras are so much more advanced than what we were using before, we needed a full system upgrade. And that included, we had to get a new computer, and just because of the bandwidth issues, and also we needed that because of having two cameras and then the